Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for coming along bright and early, relatively early on a Monday morning. It's really a pleasure to welcome you here to the launch of the European Climate Neutrality Observatory. When I say you, I mean those of you in the room here in Brussels and those of you who are online. It's really a pleasure to have you with us. My name is Erica Hope, and I am the Director of the Climate Planning and Laws Programme at the European Climate Foundation. And it's my honour to be your host here for this launch today. Now, ECNO has been quite a while in the making, and we really do have high hopes that it's going to be an important new player on the scene to try and help the EU in its transition to climate neutrality. And we have a wonderful array of speakers here today to help us bring it into the world. First of all, I must just give a small apology. Laurence Tubiana, the CEO of the European Climate Foundation, will be joining us, but not for the opening remarks due to a travel change. But she will be joining us a little bit later, and she'll be giving closing remarks instead. Which means that myself and Matthias Duwe from Ecologic will be giving you some context for ECNO, before we go into having a keynote address from Claude Turmes, the Minister for Energy and Spatial Planning from Luxembourg. Then we will have a presentation of the flagship report of ECNO, its launching piece from three key members of the consortium, the ECNO consortium. And then we will have a panel discussion with four very distinguished guests. We will have Yvonne Slingenberg from DG Klima, also who will be arriving a little bit later after a meeting. And then we will have also Florie Gonsolin from CEFIC, representing the chemical industry. Robert Jeschke from the Polish National Emissions Management Authority, and Josko Klisovic, representing the city of Zagreb and the Committee of the Regions. And we hope to have time, or we may see if we have time, for at least a couple of questions from the room. And may I say to our guests who are joining us online, I have no idea where to look, but that way. If you would like to ask any questions, please do make use of the Q&A function. We have a team of people who've been involved in the work who are there ready to answer your questions. So at any point during the session, if you have questions of clarification or comments or things you'd like to know, please don't be shy and put your question in there. So now, to provide some context for the rest of the day, let me turn to the question of why ECNO. First, let us step back and just for a moment, watch this. So I think this speaks for itself. This is really the reason why, truly, in atmospheric existential terms, we're all needing to get so active in this space. And the IPCC report from earlier this year confirmed very much that we are in the midst of a worsening climate crisis, which we start to observe more and more directly all over the world, but including in Europe. We're seeing worsening weather conditions, more instability, very erratic behavior, and often vulnerable communities being really in the worst receiving end of that. And the global community is trying to get organized. The Paris Agreement, adopted 7 years ago now, or even a bit more, that set out a clear temperature goal and a clear global emissions reduction pathway to achieve that goal. And thanks to this impetus, the impetus that the Paris Agreement has provided, 92% of global GDP is now covered by net zero commitments. But we should not underestimate what achieving those emissions reductions means. It means reimagining the way we consume, the way we produce, the way we live our daily lives. It means replacing long-standing business practices and technologies, shifting habits, redirecting resources to more climate-friendly investments, and many, many other changes that require quite some foresight and planning. And there is no time to lose. It is very clear from the science that this is the decisive decade. It's actions now in the 2020s that will determine whether or not we manage to make those reductions. The EU, for its part, is trying to respond to what's just been set out. It's been developing its climate policy toolbox for over 20 years now. And in particular, since the Paris Agreement, it's been really trying to step up the long-term dimension, with climate neutrality by 2050 now being the cornerstone of the EU's chief economic strategy, the Green Deal. And the emissions target is legally binding in the European climate law. And the EU has also adopted, particularly recently, a toolbox of measures to trigger these transitions in many sectors and also to manage the process. That's where the EU climate law in particular and the governance regulation come in. Now, on those tools to manage the process, a key one is progress monitoring. Often when we think about progress monitoring, we just look at how emissions are doing, how the trajectory is turning and how we are relative to our objective there. And for the EU, if we look at this basic goal of emissions reduction, the goal and the trend, we see a clear need for additional action. As of 2021, which is pre most of the Green Deal policies, but the last year for which verified data is available, the EU had achieved an emissions reduction of 30% in 2021 compared to 1990 levels. This trend is too slow, clearly, to be on a linear trajectory to 55% reductions by 2030. And this is further confirmed by projections of emissions from member states that the European Environment Agency published earlier this year. Additional action is definitely needed. So we know that progress and action need to step up, but the question is where? In which parts of the economy? Emissions come from many sources and many different structural changes are needed across society to deliver those. Just looking bluntly at the emissions curve, as we just did, and as I said, much of the progress monitoring that is done does not actually tell you where there's a lack of progress. And that's despite the fact that detailed pathways have been worked out which show what changes need to be made in which sector, what the sequencing is that's needed, what the interactions are between sectors, and many sort of important details that need to be paid attention to in this short time window that we have to get this right. So that information about where there is a lack of progress is really, really key for determining where to take action next. And this is a key insight that has informed the thinking behind ECNO. Just 1 minute more. Effective policy making to get the EU or any economy on track to climate neutrality needs sufficiently granular information to target future policies where they're needed and to unlock the changes that long-term backcast planning tells us we need. This means looking under the emissions curve to understand where and how and at what pace policies are translating into real-world changes, and perhaps more importantly, where they're failing to do so. And it also means looking at whether the structural changes, the structural enablers of changes that will be needed further into the transition, whether those are also being put in place in good time to make sure that the necessary shifts will happen as we progress. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the new laws adopted under the EU Green Deal do include additional tools for managing the transition. So alongside the laws for actually delivering reductions in particular sectors, we've got a requirement under the EU climate law to have an assessment from the European Commission of collective progress by the EU towards climate neutrality. That is supposed to be, will be produced by September of this year and every 5 years after. But That law does not specify any procedural steps for that progress monitoring, nor any particular clear methodology as to how it's going to be done. And so there is a real risk that this important new monitoring mechanism, while certainly a welcome addition, will not provide sufficient detail to pinpoint exactly where course correction may be needed. This is where ECNO comes in, and I shall now pass to Matthias.
So against the backdrop of what Erika just laid out, ECNO's mission is to help the EU achieve climate neutrality through scientifically rigorous analysis of economy-wide progress, but also through doing impartial checks on other EU climate policy processes. We hope for ECNO to be an independent provider of information to decision makers in the EU, to interested stakeholders such as yourselves. In particular, in those areas and where the EU institutions are currently not fulfilling the function of providing that kind of information. This progress assessment that kicks us off today, and that is the focus now of the launch, is something that we hope to be repeating annually, but there are other pieces of analysis in the works. So, for example, we are already preparing for a very specific check on the draft national energy and climate plans that are due to be submitted later this week, in fact. Let me turn, though, with that sense of the overall mission to the organizations and the people behind ECNO. And of course, first and foremost here, we have a group of research institutes that bring together a significant bandwidth of expertise, different types and areas of climate policy, economics, finance, governance across the whole economy. We're very happy to be working with the likes of Climact here in Belgium, with the Institute for Climate Economics in France, with Reform Institute in Poland, and NewClimate Institute in Germany, where also my home organization, Ecologic Institute, is based. But our scientific analysis and the insights gained from that wouldn't be reaching their desired audiences if it weren't for the support that we have been getting and will be getting through the colleagues that are bringing in their expertise on communications and design, 89up from the UK, and our dear colleague John Lang from Consult Climate have been helping us with branding, website, etc., and are giving us support in outreach to media. And then, of course, this whole initiative supported and in fact brought to life, and with the original idea coming from the European Climate Foundation. We're very grateful for the support intellectually, emotionally, and of course financially that our group has been getting. I was actually able to track on my phone back the message when Erika first contacted me about this general idea of some observatory to track what's happening in EU climate policy. And that was actually to the week 3 years ago. So it's been in the making for a while. We really hope that our outputs will be used by the types of organizations and constituencies that we have here in the room. And we're looking forward to feedback and to engaging in discussion with you. And with that, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matthias. And so, yeah, ECNO, in a sense, it's a new entity for this new era of implementation that we really have to enter with great conviction now. And somebody who knows a lot about lawmaking and a lot about implementation is our keynote speaker, Claude Turmes, who many of you who are active in climate and energy policy here in Brussels and across Europe will know as the former MEP and rapporteur for the Renewable Energy Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Governance Regulation, many other important pieces of the framework. And for the past few years, serving as the Minister for Energy and Spatial Planning in Luxembourg. And Claude, very unfortunately, wasn't able to be here with us today, but he has kindly recorded some thoughts on a video address.
Hello, dear Erika. Hello, dear Matthias, dear guests. Of course, climate change is a tough issue, especially in these days where we see these dramatic fires in Canada, a dry in Europe, which is building up, which doesn't look good for for the summer. But I think we should not forget that doing climate policies has a lot of positive side effects. Climate policies comes with often with very positive effects on the quality of life of people. In a city center, if we have more adaptation, which means more trees, more green, the air will be fresher. If we have less cars, more bikes, more public transport, less noise, more socializing in the public space. And of course, climate change politics is also about building the economy of the future, be it green technology, where we are strong in Europe, or green finance, where Europe is also a leader, especially also since we have in place already a taxonomy which starts to drive the finances, the investments into the right direction, whereas other continents don't have it. So climate change is tough, but there is also a lot of positive if we are able to get the actions up and running. The Fit for 55, I think, is the result of a window of opportunity in the European policy making, where we had the positive pressure from the Fridays for Future, from a European Commission president who had to go to more ambitious climate policies under the pressure of the majorities in the European Parliament, and an ugly war, which has one positive side effect, which is more and more people in Europe, at least, understanding that we have to get rid of fossil fuel. And we have well used this at EU level. We have risen the climate ambition to where it should be. We have finalized the ETS negotiations. We have gone in the renewables, which is really a big part of the solution, which is solar and wind. We have now upgraded the ambition from where it was in 2018 at Commission level, 28% to almost 45% in 2030. And we have done a lot of good work on energy efficiency, be it energy efficiency frame, but also the efficiency in data centers, the efficiency in the building sector, efficiency in the eco-design. So a lot of things are right. And then there is, of course, a second issue which we have to be sharp is the social fabric of climate change policies. Now, the climate change policies are getting into the garage, so a fossil car or an electric car, or into the cellar, oil or gas heater or heat pump, a climate-friendly heat pump. So it's getting close to the skin, to the minds, to the emotions of every citizen in Europe. And I think the one thing we have to do is to put light on these dirty lobbies, and we need a strategy against them, and we need to improve our social fabric. And because policy making is always in the risk of short-termism, because of elections, because of lobby pressure, it's imperative that we have something which is making sure that we have a long-term approach. And that is exactly why the EU governance regulation and now ECNO, so your idea to accompany this relatively well-designed EU governance regulation with an observatory is exactly the thing which we have to put into place in order to get transparency, but also analysis on where are we doing well and where do we need to improve, and to do this in a way that it is not bound to the political cycles, neither at EU level nor in the national level. And so why is the EU governance so important, and why is this observatory so important? It is also because, and that's my experience as the one policymaker who was in the European Parliament, the rapporteur, but now having 5 years experience, second we are now finalizing our second NECP, National Energy and Climate Plan. So I know why this regulation is so important, because it is a pain. It forces us as governments, as ministers of energy, of transport, of agriculture, of finance, of energy, of environment, of climate, to work together, which we never did before. So, and climate change policy is horizontal. So the governance regulation forces governments to have more coherence, and it goes into the details of the design, because climate policy is more than just CO2 pricing. It is about creating, for example, infrastructure. There is no massive biking if there is no secure biking lanes. There is no massive rollout of electric cars if there is no everywhere presence of electric chargers. There is no, or there will be no green hydrogen in key industrial sectors if there is no infrastructure, new pipelines for the green hydrogen. So climate policy is more than just pricing. It is about organizing the change at the level of infrastructure, and then what I mentioned also before, at the level of the social fabric. So in Luxembourg, where I'm now active as a minister, we spent a lot of time to build coalitions with the local authorities. So we have a climate pact where the 100 local authorities we have are all structurally in, and we reward them also financially if they help us in rolling out the climate-friendly infrastructure, and if they help us to build the social fabrics, the social coherence we need on climate change. We speak a lot to the industry, we speak a lot to the craftsmen, because we need people on the roof to build the PV and basically in the cellar to mount the heat pump. And of course, we need much more active participations of citizens. So we have now enshrined at national level a standing climate panel of citizens, and we are trying to do that at local level. So to conclude, we need the governance regulation because it forces us governments, us ministers, to go into the necessary detail, and we need ECNO, so an independent body at EU level to create more transparency, but also to create an independent policy analysis on where are we good in, why are we good in certain countries in doing things, and where are we not good enough, and ideas on how we get better. That would be my message to you, and thank you a lot to European Climate Foundation to set up this body, this new body, ECNO.
Great. Very nice to see Claude there again. Thank you, Claude, if you're watching. Probably not, but great to see you back again, and some very, very important points there, including about where the policies hit the people and how we need to increasingly work that out. So that's why ECNO, the general background for it. And now it's time to get to the business end of things. We're now going to have a presentation of ECNO's flagship report, this progress assessment, and that's going to be given to us by 3 members of the ECNO consortium. There will be Niklas Höhne speaking first from NewClimate Institute. We will have then some input from Matthias Duwe, again from Ecologic Institute, who are the lead partners in the consortium, and then Zofia Wetmanska from Reform Institute. And their colleagues and themselves have been very involved in writing the report. So have a team of at least 30 researchers. So this is a well contributed to effort. And I'd like to give at this moment a special shout out to Eike Felten, who is the lead author of the report from Ecologic Institute. Eike, unfortunately, couldn't be here today, but we're thinking of you and send you our best wishes for this important launch day. And just a reminder to those of you online, don't know if you've been putting in questions, but you may start to have some thoughts triggered as the presentation happens. So please do get busy with your keyboard. With that, I will now pass over to Niklas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erica. We are standing here for a large team of people. We already said it. It's 30, maybe even 40 people contributed to this report. And we are very, very, very happy to present it to you. We are now having here the executive summary of the flagship report. There's a full report if you want to go into the details. And there is the website, the climateobservatory.eu, where you can look at all the details, all the indicators that we are looking at. So we said already we wanted to do an observatory of the progress of the transformation towards zero emissions. And well, first of all, you need to think about how you do it. Because it's the first of its kind. I think it's the most comprehensive study on looking at progress towards zero emissions. And the way we have been setting it up is with 13 building blocks. And the building blocks include the regular sectors that you're used to, electricity, buildings, mobility, industry, agri-food, and also carbon dioxide removal. Those are the sectors where emissions are coming from. And we look into them in very much detail. But we also have some overarching building blocks, like governance, where you look at the structures, just transition, because the whole transition will not work if it's not socially just. About lifestyles, we need to change our lifestyles to be ready for the transition. It's about adaptation to climate change. It's the EU's external actions, or what the EU does outside of the EU, influencing the whole world or helping the whole world. It's about clean tech, so developing new technologies. And very importantly, it's about finance, how the money is flowing. So these are the 13 building blocks that we all looked at in detail. And for each of these building blocks, we looked at quantitative indicators. And these indicators we grouped into objectives and enablers. Objectives, it's clear that's where the emissions are going. For the electricity sector, for example, it's the emissions in that sector, or it's the share of renewables in that sector. That's what we want to achieve. But we really need to look under the curve, so under the surface. What are the enablers that help us to achieve it? Because only if the enablers are right, then we can be sure that we're going in the right direction. And for electricity, that would be, for example, grid integration. How well are we doing in integrating variable renewables into the grid? And we are trying to measure it and to measure progress there. One important thing to measure progress is against which benchmarks are we measuring progress? That, I think, is very important. And there's basically two ways how you could do it. We decided for one, and which is we took the EU official data, the EU official benchmarks that the EU set themselves. Yeah, so there's many documents. That's the long-term strategy. It's the EU climate target plan. And there are many other more detailed documents which basically describe where the EU wants to go to implement its own targets. Those are the benchmarks against we measure. Yeah, they come from the EU itself. This is not a benchmark which would say, okay, is this 1.5 compatible? Is it compatible with the Paris Agreement? We have not been doing that. Actually, if you would do that, the benchmarks would be more stringent than they are already. Yeah. So if you look at the results, we have, you could say, have been kind of generous to the EU, saying we are only judging the EU against its own targets. If we would really judge them against 1.5 or the Paris Agreement, it would be more stringent. But that's what we've been doing. So the targets themselves come from the EU itself. And how do we do it all the time? Well, we have some data for the past. We do that for the objectives and for the enablers. Usually it's from 2015 to 2021 or 2016 to 2022. We then see where the trend is going. And in some cases, the trend is going in the wrong direction, as you see here as an example, while the target is going downwards. And on the basis of that difference between the assessed trend and the target, we make a progress assessment and then basically categorize all of these indicators in 4 categories. Green, as the color suggests, is on track. So those are the indicators that are really moving in the right direction, as the EU is saying. And on the other side of the spectrum is red, is where the indicator is going in the complete opposite direction as it should, wrong direction. And then we have 2 in the middle, 1 too slow and 1 far too slow. You can imagine what they mean. So these colors or these icons, they give you a little bit of an indication where things are going. Green is good, red is not so good. And with that, you are interested in the results and you will hear them from Matthias.
Thank you very much indeed, Niklas, for setting out the overall approach in a comprehensive form. So without further ado, I want to show you what that method applied across the 13 building blocks did in terms of results. And so I'm going first to a dashboard that shows you all of those 13 building blocks and the 104 indicators. I'm going to speak to the overall picture, to the building blocks, and then we're going to zoom into a few of the building blocks. That will be done by Zofia. And so here you can see that we have essentially the full spectrum of the classes represented in terms of our assessed past progress of the building blocks. Only one of them assessed to be on track on that basis of the data 2015, 16, 2021, and two of them even going in the wrong direction. And then the vast majority is moving in the right direction, but too slow or even far too slow. On the upper half, you see the sectoral building blocks. And there we have electricity first, which was on the brink of being on track. We'll see that in the zoom in more detail, but judged to be too slow on the basis of the enablers, lack of progress there. We have in the sectoral building blocks also carbon dioxide removal in the wrong direction. There were some data issues here, but also largely this is due to the decrease in natural sinks in recent years that it is in that category. And then you have essentially the classic economic emission sectors that are all far too slow based on that past progress snapshot. Then on the lower half, you have the cross-cutting ones. And here you have the one that was assessed to have been on track with governance, which we'll also zoom in. There was a progress assessed as being significant, but not quite fast enough on just transition and clean technologies. And then you have lifestyles and adaptation and external action in the far too slow category. With lifestyles, you may see, a number of the dots there don't have one of the four color classifications, but that fifth one, which is basically showing you that there wasn't really sufficient data for the indicator identified to actually do an assessment. And so this you may also take as a sign that indeed there is a lack of attention being paid to that specific potential facilitating policy area for the rest. Adaptation was on the brink of being going in the wrong direction, but was judged to overall have been just about far too slow. And then we have finance here. And that is the one cross-cutting area that is going in the wrong direction on the basis of the data that we assessed. And so if we put that all in perspective, I think, if you're seeing it here, again, snapshot of past progress that we're seeing. And so we need to understand these findings in the context of the very dynamic and evolving policy landscape that we've seen, in particular since the adoption of the European Green Deal. Many of you, one way or another, in the room and online will have been monitoring, following, or being engaged in actively different parts of Fit for 55 and the package. And so the impacts of those policies that have been adopted over the past years, they're not showing yet in the past data. So our overall assessment is that with that additional dynamic that we're seeing, which I think can be expected to be triggering additional and faster progress in a lot of the key sectors that need transition, that the overall progress is going to be shifting towards the positive end on the basis of those policies. So our overall assessment for the EU in a more nuanced sense then would be the EU is moving in the right direction, even if it's still overall too slow. With that, let's go and look at some of these in more detail. Zofia, please.
Thank you so much. I really hope the Commission got the same text message 3 years ago, and we're going to see results any day now. I promise not to be my usual self, so I'm going to start and try to bring you a message of hope. But let me start with more concerning results first. When we are talking about climate-related investment in finance, the assessment has been that it's going in the wrong direction. And that indeed could put the whole climate transition at risk, which is quite worrying, and that's why we want to highlight this. In terms of objectives, the climate-related investment gap based on EIB data has been assessed at 360 billion euro per year, and we need to scale up investments in climate-related areas by 1.5 times what we are spending today to reach the 2030 goals. Climate-related investment is essential for the future reduction potential of the economy. So this is why it's quite worrying. This is why we pay attention to this. In terms of the concept of enablers, they have been implemented through redirecting public funds away from fossil fuels, adjusting market prices to set the right incentives, as well as mobilizing private finance. As you can see, the data is insufficient for the latter, mixed for the market prices, and really worrying when it comes to fossil fuel subsidies. When we zoom in on the trends and the current trends and the benchmark that has been set for the 2030 targets, between 2015 and 2020, the annual increase has been of fossil subsidies has been by 1.5 billion euros per year, and even higher in 2021, 2020, due to the ongoing energy crisis and the cost of living crisis associated with it. Not only were these the subsidies, the direct subsidies, but also lower rates for taxation. However, as promised, I'm going to be more positive. The EU has promised to phase out, to put a sunset date for fossil fuel subsidies and set the date for 2025, which could be quite an optimistic signal, but also quite an urgency to phase the fossil fuel subsidies in a very short period of time. And more emissions in terms of policy developments that could bring that hope is the development related to Fit for 55 package, where more emissions are covered by pricing schemes, the transport and building sector emissions in specific, and also the sustainable finance regulation might any day now require the publication of mandatory disclosure of transition plans, which might bring us the knowledge on data and might bring the whole sustainable finance sphere closer to reaching the needed targets. Now let's talk about electricity. As Matthias has mentioned, the developments here were on the brink of achieving the green mark. However, this is a perfect example of why the ECNO is actually needed. If you look at the objective and the greenhouse emissions of electricity generation, they are indeed on track. It seems quite all right. We could be quite happy with it, but this is the very idea of why we need to look under the curve to assess what's going on, what's the progress, and how close we are getting to the 2030, 2050 targets. Let's focus on the share of variable renewable energies in electricity generation. And here, the progress is far too slow. If you look at the trend and the current trend and the benchmark, we need to speed up twice as much. The changes needed to be twice as much as fast to achieve the 2030 targets. Annual increase previously has been estimated 1.5%. It needs to be 3.2 to achieve the 2030 target. So even though the high level overarching objective is quite green, the details is what is showing us how to achieve the actual progress and where the progress is. And clean power system has obviously a key facilitative function for the other sectors. So its success in the achieving the green mark for this particular enabler is a success for a whole transition. In terms of hope, again, trying really hard to be a bit more optimistic, we do have a higher renewable target for 2030. We do have easier permitting within the Repower EU program. So there are some movements in the right direction. However, again, it is really crucial to pay attention to enablers and focus on interconnectors, grid investment, smart meters, and rollout of all of the enabling infrastructure that's actually needed to achieve the key progress in the electricity sector. To finish off, let me focus on the governance. We've heard a lot about the overarching frameworks, and I think the consortium here was quite in agreement based on the available data that the comprehensive overall framework is in place and supported by citizens. This is due to the developments of climate laws happening nationally and citizen assemblies and higher awareness rates all over the globe and in Europe in specific. One enabler that's going too slow is actually to a functioning policy cycle indicator. And as you can see, too many countries do not have a robust framework to guide the long-term plans, to guide the long-term actions. And so we are just above 50%, reaching 60% when it comes to the long-term strategies and being put in place. So this is something we need to work on, but the message is overall quite positive. We do have an increasingly robust framework that guides and facilitates adequate actions. And these frameworks are being put fairly recently. So we are yet to see the results of what they triggered and how they leveraged what's going on. And I'm speaking here about EU climate law and associated programs and plans. I'm talking about European Scientific Advisory Board and recent recommendations of it. And the mandated progress and consistency assessments that we are yet to see the results of. And that's going to be really interesting to see how ECNO could compare with that and work with it. However, the implementation of all of these strategies and plans that have been recently put in place is now needed to fulfill its full potential to actually be useful for guiding the transition process. And with that, thank you, Matthias. I'm going to give it back to you.
Thank you so much, Zofia, for providing a glimpse of the information contained in the assessment. Thank you. I hope that you all got a sense of how the approach shown by Niklas implemented here might be able to inform future policy making. The breakdown, I think, of some of the building blocks here showed that indeed this kind of more granular, more detailed level, structured with the look at enabling conditions can actually provide additional information as to where to target policies going forward. And so on that basis, let me take you through some of the lessons learned and the recommendations that the consortium has formulated on the basis of this work. And really, ECNO here hopes to stimulate a broader dialogue on how the EU can build up and set up a better system for tracking the transition. And the first of the recommendations that we would have is the one that may be quite obvious, which is do consider the results of this exercise, carry out additional ones, verify the need for action in the areas where we're showing that objectives and enablers are going far too slow or in the wrong direction, and then try to take specific action to remedy the lack of progress where, in particular, the policies adopted over the last 2 years may not sufficiently do so already. Then the second one is, if indeed you agree that this type of exercise can be useful to inform policymaking, then really, the ECNO idea is to be filling in a function while EU institutions are not doing that by themselves. But ultimately, what we would want is for there to be the development of an official transition tracking and monitoring framework. And so we would ask that indeed EU institutions engage in an open and transparent process that is open to expert inputs on where and how to basically be zooming into, and to develop basically then an official system based on these types of indicators that are looking also at what's happening under the emissions curve. And what we would suggest is that is the developments of such a system can actually inform multiple processes and should be integrated and can be integrated in a smart way with other similar systems. So on the one hand, you have, say, the 8th Environment Action Programme has its own monitoring system. You have the European semester using indicators to track progress. These things could be integrated and therefore, you can actually also reduce overall effort and administrative burden if you have a more harmonized and integrated tracking system. And then our third point here is that one of the things that we clearly encountered as we were trying to paint that quite comprehensive picture of progress, that availability of information on benchmarks as to kind of official pathways of the EU into the future are sometimes simply not available or are outdated because the underlying analysis isn't updated frequently enough, and that we have significant data gaps as well. Out of our 104 indicators, a good quarter basically had to be judged to have insufficient data. Sometimes this didn't necessarily come as a surprise. We chose a few indicators because we thought that is the best way that you would measure this enabler, knowing that information would be hard to come by. But in most cases, we actually tried to find proxies to really get a sense of where the progress is on those enablers. And even still, data wasn't available. So that is key to address and can be done. And then the last one is, if you indeed have that information, set up that system, design something, build it in to the legislation, that there is actually something that happens on that basis. We do have this, say, in the European semester, you have the alert mechanism report that basically then triggers other further actions of verification. In the effort sharing regulation or climate action regulation, you have a means of identifying additional actions, and then member states have to come up with their corrective plans. So this does exist, and something like that would be needed also at the EU level. And while we hope with this input to contribute to a broader debate here on how we can do this better, we also see a very clear window for opportunity here. Both the governance regulation and the EU climate law formally are due for review by the middle of next year. Maybe some of that, the specifics might move into the next Commission's term, but clearly the opening to look at that regulation is already there. And so changes can be implemented at the legislative level. And at the same time, there isn't necessarily a reason to wait for that window, because the Commission already has the mandate to assess progress towards climate neutrality. And so on that basis, it could get started on developing a more robust and detailed system already. With that, I hope that we have also piqued your interest in terms of looking into some of the details. And I very much look forward to feedback and to the views of our esteemed panelists. And I will hand it back over to Erica. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matthias and Niklas and Zofia. I hope that was clear, and indeed, as Matthias says, has piqued your interest. There are some copies of the executive summary at the back, and the actual report is quite a tome, so be careful before you press print, but we hope we'll give you a quick glimpse of the website, which is now live as well at the end of today's session. So yes, we hope really that ECNO is going to be of use to policymakers, to policy actors, to media, certainly a very rich source of data. And of course, we hope that the institutions will take note of those recommendations in all their facets. So now I would like to invite our panelists up to take a seat up here. I think I'm going to explore this side of the room to just have a change. So if Josko, Robert and Florie can come up, and I think Yvonne is not quite here yet, but she will be with us very shortly. She's just running across from Avenue d'Albigam. I think you can go here. Thanks. Yvonne has just arrived. Oh, perfect. Amazing timing. Well, welcome. Lots of water. Do you want some water or something? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Great. That was a quick run. Thank you. So yes, just to introduce our panelists, we have Yvonne Slingenberg, who's a director from DG Klima in the European Commission, fast runner also. We have Florie Goncelin, who is from CEFIC, the Chemical Industry Sector Association. We have Robert Jeschke, who is leading the Polish National Emissions Management Authority, and Josko Klisovic, who is the president of the City Council of Zagreb, and also rapporteur for the European Committee of the Regions opinion on the EU governance regulation that we heard about from Claude. So a really nice range of perspectives here, I think, that we can hear from today. And I think perhaps, giving everyone a moment to catch her breath. Otherwise, normal form would be to start with the Commission, but let's do it another way. I think, Florie, if I may begin with you. So, Florie, you're in charge of organising CEFIC's internal thinking and related projects to do with the transition, basically, and the transformations that are going to be needed in industry, which are obviously underpinning a lot of transformations in other sectors. So can I just start with the basic question? Do you see added value for your industry in having this kind of observatory?
Yes. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. I will start by saying that this is indeed for us a very valuable initiative, in particular for my work. So I think that's will inform quite a lot of what we are doing on the climate transition. I oversee the transition of the chemical sector more from a general perspective, including other Green Deal objectives and the CSS, and how we combine the different challenges. We have been working together with the Commission, mostly with DG GROW on the chemical industry transition pathway. So this is useful. And this is very much in line with our own thinking that we shouldn't talk only about the what we try to achieve, but also about the how. So in that sense, I find it very good that you also look at how the European Union is progressing on the enablers for the transformation. So that when there is too slow progress, as in many instances, we can identify what is the underlying reason for this lack of progress. As CEFIC, we have always been strong proponents of sectoral climate roadmap. We wanted this to be a binding exercise in the climate law. Unfortunately, it's not. So, but still we try to take our fate in our own hands here. And we are developing our own tools to understand at least how this would look at the level of the EU chemical industry with the transition pathway, which I was just mentioning, but we also have developed our own IT modeling tool in order to be able to simulate different possible pathways to climate neutrality for the chemical sector. And that gives us a lot of valuable information also on what are the enablers for the chemical sector. So I think that there can be very interesting synergies between all these exercises.
Great. Thank you. Really, very good work that I think is being done by the industry to work out what it needs to do and so on. We saw a bit there of ECNO's results. I don't know how much chance you've had to actually study the report, but would you like to share any thoughts on its assessment of how industry is actually doing and how that measures up to your own transition pathway and what you think is needed?
Yeah. So I have focused, of course, on the section that where you have been tracking progress of the industry. I like very much your thinking that you need to look beneath the emission curve. But then I would challenge you to go even further and look beneath the industry emission curve. So as the chemical sector, we are often put together in the same basket as energy-intensive industries. And of course, we have a lot of commonalities, but we also have a lot of differences in the challenges that we face. You mentioned sometimes the word decarbonization. So indeed, for some sectors, the name of the game is getting rid of carbon. For us, the story is completely different. We are molecule managers, which means we are carbon managers among other molecules. And chemistry will remain based on carbon. For us, the question is not how we get rid of that carbon, but how we manage it better, how we switch to non-fossil sustainable carbon sources, and how we make sure that this carbon is not emitted in the atmosphere. And that's why for us, the climate neutrality challenge is very much linked to the circularity challenge. And sometimes it's not always very clear how you link a little bit the two objectives. For us, the value chain approach is very important. You cannot look at the chemical sector in isolation from the rest of society. And I noticed, unless I missed it, the waste sector is not mentioned in your analysis. So for me, that would be also a very important area to look at. Because if you look at the chemical industry, most of the CO2 that is emitted outside the boundaries of our facilities. And a lot of the carbon that is contained in chemical products is emitted when the product reaches end of life. So I think it's important really to take a system perspective at our industry, but also at many other sectors. And that's why I think also focusing the analysis on final energy demand is misleading because, again, that's our specificity, having to substitute current feedstock, fossil-based feedstock with cleaner alternatives, as far as we are concerned, will mean a massive increase in the amount of energy and low-carbon electricity that we need to be able to substitute this existing kind of feedstock. So there is not always the correlation that you might think between climate objectives and energy demand. So final energy demand is one indicator, but I think for us looking at this more globally and what are the overall material flows and energy flows in the economies is a more informative perspective.
Great, thank you very much. Very, very useful to hear that, those sort of more very informed perspectives on the way it's been done. And I should say the intention is to repeat the ECNO progress assessment each year. And following this launch, there will be a fairly sort of active effort to seek feedback on the way it's been done and whether the indicators chosen are the right ones and so on. So very much a spirit of sort of continuous improvement expected with that. But Flori, if I may just ask you one more question before giving you a break and moving to one of our other guests. So it's very useful points there on the sort of approach that's been taken to look at industry. And that may answer some of the questions about, well, how the results have come out. The assessment for industry is that it's too slow in terms of its progress. Would you like to share any thoughts on that and how it can be best supported to speed up?
Yeah. So the recent publication of the advisory board on climate change was, I think, reminding us of the limited time that we have to go through complete transformation of the industry. For us, it's not a pace of emission reduction or transformation that we have ever seen in history. It's industrial revolution. I mean, for us, it's not only changing the way we produce, but also what we produce. And I think, the targets for 2040 are not yet set, but we know industry and DTS sectors are first in row. So we see signals that, for us, 2050 is becoming 2040. That means we have 18 years to go through massive changes, and I think that will require a lot of thinking about how we orchestrate this transformation. But we are not here again in isolation from the rest of society. Infrastructure was mentioned. I think for us that is an absolutely crucial point in getting access to alternative resources and low carbon energy. So we are a little bit dependent on the rest of society there. So, but I think now, there will be really awareness that we need to accelerate. And I think, looking at the how is important.
Thanks very much, Laurie. And indeed, I think that's very much in the spirit of ECNO. The more focused we can get on the details of really what needs to happen, hopefully, the more rapid we can become, because time is running out. If I may turn to Robert now, from Poland. So Robert, over the past few years, you've been setting up the Centre for, let me get this right, Climate and Energy Analysis in Poland, Centre for Climate and Energy Analysis, if I'm correct, to enhance the analytical capacity for looking at how EU and national climate policy is progressing. So can I just ask you to share some thoughts on whether you agree with the notion that this more granular information granular information on how real world change is actually progressing can be a useful informer for the right policies?
Yes, thank you for the invitation for the beginning. And we started from the very same reasons as you started with the ECNO. So our attitude was to deliver knowledge and information and data for evidence-based policy making in Europe and Poland. So it means that we, at the very beginning, we support any movements that are collecting granular data or any data, any information that will speed up the transformation process and make it just and wise. When we started the projects and wanted to deliver this information, it's a long time schedule. So we are, as you see, you started 3 years ago. So it's a long-going process, and what we observe in the European Union with the climate policy making is even faster. So, so when you want to deliver the information and gathering this information on preparing toolbox models and prepare analysis, it's a long-lasting process. And at the same time, I observed that the process of decision-making is faster than the preparation of the knowledge that you should support this policy-making. So it's a very sensitive division between how you make wise decision-making process based on the data that you are not have already. So I think we are in the middle of the, as you said, and Flori said that we also observe a long-lasting process of speeding, which is not bad in general perspective, because climate is changing and we have to react as fast as we can. But at the same time, we have to do this wisely, because this is a very complex process. And it depends on the differentiation of sectors we have in Europe. The sectors are different in different countries, so there are specifics of these countries. There are social aspects, there are economical aspects, there are policy-making aspects. So there are different layers of observation you have to focus on. So in these terms, ECNO initiative is very good, in a good sense, delivering the metrics of data that you could rely on, or at least see where you should focus on your reactions. And I think this kind of attitude, we need that in EU, because there is no way that only Commission capacity can deliver the information we all need, because the speed up we are in it urges all of us in any, let's say, scientific background or analytical background on tech or society or sectoral level attitude as you build your own models also to deliver the information to support this process and make it right. So I think it's simply answering question, we need this data urgently. So it's very good idea you're presenting now here.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I mean, it's good to hear that the various people are coming to the same conclusion, I guess, of what is needed. And indeed, doing things takes longer than talking about them to set them up. Very interesting that you comment there as well on the data time lag, which is really a difficult issue that we all, I guess, have to deal with. And I think something that we somehow need to find ways to address. But I should say with ECNO, this is something that we had some difficulties with, because the last verified data, as I mentioned, is basically from 2021. And so the results that ECNO gives are before the impacts of most of the new Fit for 55 policies have been seen. So what ECNO does is gives us the baseline for showing, hopefully the impacts of those policies starting to deliver. And, we don't want to kind of have the story coming out that ECNO saying the Green Deal is a failure or anything like that, because, it hasn't had time to go forward, but just because the data is, taking time to catch up. So with all these, I mean, there's difficult complexities to deal with, as you mentioned, many different aspects to follow, the social aspects and the cross-cutting aspects, as well as the specific sectoral aspects. And within those, of course, there's the objectives, but also, as ECNO is doing, the enabling conditions, the underlying causes and drivers as to how progress is actually occurring. Could you just share some thoughts on whether you think that's a valuable approach and how ECNO might do it better?
I think there is no simple answer on that, because and in anyhow we are touching the data or looking on the different aspects of transformation, then you've got like Pandora box. So you open a lot of questions, you have to find answers, and there are no simple answers in this process. So the simplicity in the climate policy is gone. I think it's gone several years ago, but we missed that. I mean, we can observe now with the ending up the process of setting the 2030 target. And I think the 2040 would be another step of, I think, and I hope, making wise decisions and teaching us how we could make this policy wise in Europe. Because I think from the overall perspective, how we solve the process of decision making in Europe is let's say a good starting point for the rest of the for the rest of the world, because we are. As we see the process of, I mean, wherever we get net zero in Europe, it's not we're not stopping the climate change. So we need all other countries outside of the globe to follow up the process we are doing. But how we are doing is the lessons to them, if it's wise to do that as a EU, or it should be done differently. And in terms of delivering these enabling conditions, you need a lot of different models to cover as many aspects of the transformation as you can. In CAPE, we are building the set of tools, like starting from macroeconomic global model, that delivers information on the EU level as well as the country level in EU. At the same time, we have technical models for sectoral looking up, the energy model, transport model, agricultural model, and they are running in the circulation. So it interfere each other to see the cost of the transformation, the process where this transformation occurs in the first place, and at the cheapest cost, because it's very important also in looking on the objectives and the benchmarks. That is not a bad way. I mean, it's not a bad thing that some sectors are lagging behind, because from the macroeconomic perspective, is the process of transformation should be in the places where it's the cheapest. That's why some sectors like energy sector is delivering on the reduction at the first place, whereas the agriculture sector is lagging behind because the cost of the reduction is very high in these sectors. we are putting the sectors which are most costful also in ETS, which is transport sector. And at the same time, we are putting the building sector with the cost of reduction are cheapest. So at the same time, we are putting much more, let's say, sectoral attitude to the carbon pricing, which is, I think, also time to look if in any sector carbon pricing is the best solution. So in this respect, the enabling condition and the benchmarks or objectives that you are putting into consideration is a good way to see if there are some rooms, not for carbon pricing, but to support in any other schemes, the sectors that you can cheaply reduce the emission or help other sectors to reduce. So.
Thanks. Very, very interesting answer. And certainly this question of how far carbon pricing can do the job is a subject of endlessly lively debate in Brussels and elsewhere. And I know certainly the agriculture sector and others are ones that are starting to receive increasingly focused attention for whether more intervention is needed there in other policy respects. But I'll turn now, I think, to Josko, if I may. So, Josko, you're representing both the city of Zagreb and the Committee of the Regions. Many regions and cities all over Europe are themselves rolling up their sleeves and getting very sort of focused on the question of how to deliver climate neutrality. And you yourself, in your Committee of the Regions role, are looking at how the EU governance can help to support them in doing those and also involve subnational actors better in determining that policy. So, first of all, can I just ask, do you feel that the findings of ECNO's report, to the extent you've had time to look at them, resonate with what you observe from this more sort of on the ground level?
In one sentence, to the large extent, yes. But let me just thank you for inviting me here, and among my many roles and responsibilities, I assume that I'm invited here with my credentials as rapporteur for the Green Deal governance. And the person who should give his own contribution to for the use of the window of opportunity, which Matthias mentioned, since we are about to change governance regulations and the climate law, and we should change them for the better. I have to say that after everything I heard today, after I realized how many interesting and relevant information your report contains, and how big amount of knowledge you have in this area, that it would be foolish for politicians and policymakers not to use it, since you are really providing it free of charge for us. This is really great, and I'm a great believer in a policy which is based on evidence and relevant data, because we're talking about implementation. And implementation, if it's effective, means success. And success brings a meaning to our work, because it brings a result to us, and results are really something we are striving to. If we don't have that, then we have just a wishful thinking. So it's better to implement what we have now at the moment than to think of new targets, new policies, new goals, which are so beautiful as a bird, flying, and then just fly away and we stay where we are in status quo. So let's focus on implementation. That is my main point. And your suggestion that we should have a tracking system that can clearly and comprehensively point to us where we are doing well, where we are performing badly, where we are going in the wrong direction. It's really helping policymakers, if they are wise, to shape their policy or reshape them, to revise them, or to align them with a set of goals, or to give up really policies which go to wrong directions. I have to say, in Zagreb, we don't have such a tracking system. It's always a question of money. You need really finances to finance such a comprehensive analysis. And it's a question of skillful personnel. That personnel we in Zagreb we have. I'm not sure whether do we have enough skillful personnel, but these two, finances and skills, are the major obstacle for a very effective implementation. And when I saw the cross-cutting enabler or goal that financing are going completely in the wrong direction, I realized we'll have a problem. We'll have a problem because single action has its financial reflection. And if finances are going wrongly, then we won't have capacity to do it at the local level in terms of personnel and the money really to finance our actions. And I have to say that as a member of Committee of the Regions, I have opportunity to talk to many mayors in European Union cities and prefects of regions. And when we speak, it's usually everybody is interested in effective implementation. Everybody is interested in feedback through the effective tracking system. But usually we don't have it. But what we have is our feeling that, and usually everything is based on our gut feeling, since we don't have analysis and data. And then the citizens can really find the culprit very easily. They are politicians and they gut feeling, but not the rational analysis. People say that the basic obstacles we have is complexity and different, not consistent methodology of reporting and monitoring. We have different initiatives, we have different policies, and then we have different set of indicators which we need to fulfill to basically achieve the same thing. For us, at the local level, this is enormous burden. We want really to streamline all these reporting mechanisms and monitoring mechanisms to make it more simple. We don't need really overlapping of different policies and different mechanisms. It creates us a great burden at the local level, and we should remind ourselves that local authorities are those who implement 75% of a key, climate key or Green Deal. The other thing we have as a problem is that local authorities, which are main implementing agencies of all these policies, are not treated as partners, but just as a regular stakeholder. And we are elected representatives of public interest, such as governments and the European Union representatives. So I think that should change. And it should change in a way that local authorities are involved in policy planning, policy shaping, and in identifying the best ways to implement policies at the very early of the process, upstream in the process. Otherwise, we are faced with completed plans, completed policies, set of goals we have not participated in, and then we are requested to implement that without really a full knowledge of all of them and without the capacity to do that. Do we have a skillful person to really implement something we were not participated in? We don't have it. Do we have enough resources to do that? No. We need just to provide municipal services to our citizens, but not to implement EU policies, unless we feel it as our own policies. And in order to feel it as our own policies, we should be part of the process of planning, but equally of implementing. So we can say what we need really to implement these goals we mutually agreed upon. And their tracking system you are proposing coming into play. It will help us really to tell national level and European level what we need for full implementation. And then we can really follow it, whether it's going the way it should go or not. So that's, I'm very convinced that relevant data is a key for effective implementation, that integrated tracking system, not just in a climate a law or neutrality to achieve the neutrality target of 2050, but even in the field of economy, we need to involve European semester in all of this and the governance system of economic governance system, because they are all interrelated. I see a Green Deal as a growth strategy, which involves energy, economy, social aspects, environment, climate, everything, if we want to be successful. Otherwise, we'll end up in silos and one policy can advance very quickly at the expense of others. At the end, at the bottom line will be, bad implementation, nobody satisfied. So this is my first reaction.
Thank you very much, Josko. Well, I think some extremely helpful and relevant thoughts there for the future evolution of the governance framework and all of the ways in which it touches local authorities. Interesting, ECNO assessed the governance system as being on track, which doesn't mean it's finished. It just means it's sort of evolving appropriately at present. And I think the sorts of things you're mentioning there start to really show the ways in which, for this era of implementation, it needs to get even more fit for purpose. I think your thoughts there about the integration of the planning requirements and the sort of streamlining of those across the different pieces of legislation and even across the different governance areas. So you've got the climate governance requirements, but also the economic and social governance requirements needing a stronger integration. And then the sort of vertical integration as well, with the stakeholders being better involved from the sub-regional level. So I just wanted to ask, from that point of view, given that indeed cities and regions are very much on the front line of this implementation, if they are increasingly successfully integrated into the sort of design of these of the governance framework and indeed the policies, what would your kind of gut feeling tell us would be the sorts of things we'd start to actually see in terms of the changes or the suggestions that would be made? And do you think they would be somehow in line with what ECNO's findings have shown?
Certainly. I think that if local authorities, regional authorities are involved from the very beginning in the process, then we'll have better results. Absolutely better results. And then we will make pressure on all the levels of power to have such a tracking system you are suggesting. Because it will help us to be on the right track. We don't want really to use our resources on course of action which goes in different and in the wrong direction. This is awful for us because we need to, we are responsible in front of voters, and then you can't really imagine that you will be voted for at the next elections. So it's very important that local levels are involved from the very beginning. The governance regulations, as you mentioned, are on track. Yes, it depends how you look at it. We have national energy and climate plans. Finally, we reconcile energy and climate policy in one document. It's good. It's really good. But is it really enough? For me, it's not. And I'm going to write it in my opinion. What we need, that these plans contain another chapter, implementation chapter, where national authorities will really commit what they're going to provide us with for a better implementation, including finances, including training for our personnel, And yes, as I said, tracking should be done at the local level, at the level of cities and regions, not nationally. Why? Because if the Zagreb as a capital city is doing well in implementation of Green Deal policies, then the national average is good and government is quite satisfied. But the rest of the country is far below in implementation. But it's not seen because we are too big comparing with other cities in Croatia. So just Zagreb performing well means the whole country performs well, which is not maybe the case. We don't know. We don't have a tracking system in all the cities. So in these areas, you can see there is huge space for improvement, huge space for improvement. And we need to talk to national level and say, what we see as a problem. Up to now, we were waiting for governments to start discussions. We didn't have opportunity to initiate discussions as local authorities. So this is another element I think it's very important in governance regulations. And then as a third one, government speaks with EU level. That's fine. And they won't involve us because they are representatives of the country. It's fine. But we have something to say to the EU policymakers as well. And we know that we have many within the European Union member states, many cities and many regions. We can't just go all along here to Brussels and occupy Brussels. But we have Committee of Regions as our voice. So we can speak with one voice, we can present position, which we agree within Committee of Regions. So that's why I'm advocating another, a line of communication, direct line of communication between regions and cities through the Committee of the Region and the European Union institutions, in a way that we can be involved in working groups set by European Commission, in the consultations which Commission has with different stakeholders. So just invite representative of the Committee of Regions, so we can tell them what we have in mind, how to improve implementation and achieve all the goals which we set. And everybody's interested in results, politicians in particular, Commission very much so, because it's successful, So let's help us to help you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you very much. Okay, well, I think some important messages there conveyed, and very, very good to hear this important perspective from the cities and the regions. I will now turn to Yvonne. So thank you again for joining us, and just going back again to the sort of the basics of ECNO, it's looking at how the EU is doing in its transition. And that is something that the Commission has an obligation to also make an assessment of under the EU climate law. The results of your progress assessment are supposed to be published alongside the State of the Energy Union later this year. So can I just ask first what you take away from ECNO's approach and results that you think might be able to contribute to this assessment?
Does it work? Yes, it works. Super. So also from my side, good to have this debate, to be here. Sorry to have arrived a little bit late, but I can assure you that I studied all the material ever since you start bringing it out in bits, over time. I can only congratulate you because I think this is super timely work, very useful. I also liked what the other said, that, this is being done, let's say, cost-free for us. So that's a very useful addition to what we work with, because of course we get member states reports in, sometimes on time, sometimes not on time. We need to compare and assess, and that indeed we will do as foreseen in the European climate law in the autumn. But I'm sure that will indeed, be open for improvement. There's always scope for improvement. So that's why I think this discussion is so interesting. You also mentioned that at some stage we will be reviewing the governance regulation. In fact, we will be first starting with an evaluation. That is always good, time allowing. So we hope to launch that very soon. Call for evidence, typically, I think, early July. So that's very soon. So there, all this input can also come, and then we will come out with the evaluation. We can discuss that again, and then I think it will be definitely for the new commission coming in to make any legal proposal. So I think what is interesting in what you've done through ECNO is indeed to look at the enablers also. I mean, we've always looked at headline targets, which is, of course, in a way, the end result, we kind of the most important, if you don't mind my saying so, because ultimately, and we hear that a lot, is also like, okay, ultimately where the emission reductions come from, is more or less the same. It's a global problem. But still, I fully agree that, in view of the challenges ahead of us, the very high ambition levels we've set in the Fit for 55 package, knowing that we need to also already now keep in mind what comes after 2030, because many of the decisions we take today will have an impact and will be crucial, in fact, for that. I think it is really very, very useful to have this broader perspective, to look at the enablers, as we've called them. I think Claudia also made good comments. I think basically I could have just said, okay, I didn't need to say anything, because all the comments that were made, I think, were very, very pertinent. Maybe one thing, I mean, of course, when we looked at the data, it was like, okay, well, it was up until 2021. So, of course, a lot has happened. And I think you also mentioned that, which might give a little bit of a different picture. I think Josko mentioned the finance issue, but I mean, we did have, a very peculiar and sad situation with the high energy prices, etc. So there was a lot of compensation there, which indeed, I suppose we could say, went in the wrong direction. But hopefully also when more recent data come in, we see it going in a bit of a different direction, a better direction. I mean, we did have, all the EU level funding instruments really trying to support, the clean energy transition and the green transition. So yeah, I'm confident that will look better next time. And then, yeah, I think we fully agree with you that, it is a cross-cutting approach, this whole transition. We will be needing radical transformations, all sectors, they interlink very much. So it is complex. I also agree with that. And that's a lead in to say that, and I think it's also what Robert was saying. I mean, ultimately, maybe not everything can be captured in legislation. And in fact, we considered whether as part of the Fit for 55, we should do a review of the governance regulation. But we said, well, that will just make it more complex because we don't know what will be the end result on all the other legislation. And then we need to make sure that even that stays coherent. So we're going to do that now in the next revision. But I'm not sure. And that is, of course, what we need to look at, that this level of breadth we need to have in the governance regulation itself. Because what I would like to underline is that within the Commission, I think what has really been a great improvement now, thanks to the Green Deal, is that we think we have much more coherence in how the different funding instruments and how the different pieces of legislation interact. And we want to keep an eye on that. So even the European semester, those kind of things, and the recovery facility, the repower chapters, we're really very, very closely working together between the services to make sure that, the one doesn't support this or fund that. And actually, it goes against, let's say, the clean energy transition. So I think that is a major achievement that we have with the European Green Deal. So we will build on that. But that doesn't mean that all of that can be combined in one legal instrument, because then we would basically have this jumbo, mega, whatever, one single. We will continue with the different reporting strands, but coherence, I think, there is super useful. And we're looking forward to discussing with you, how to keep the necessary solidity and high quality assured data that should come through the governance regulation, because that is really what we are, of course, held accountable for also. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have, a much broader view on things. And ECNO will, I'm sure, also help a lot there. So.
Great. Thank you very much, Yvonne. And I think you responded to various questions that I was thinking of as you went along. So excellent job. You mentioned there the sort of increasing coherence that there is now across the Commission. And I know that the whole of government approach is something that has been very much behind the spirit of the Green Deal. One of ECNO's sort of recommendations is to really try and have a very integrated set of indicators that you might use between obviously your kind of climate policy governance processes, but potentially also things like the EU semester or the Environmental Action Plan, or all of the different processes that are used to monitor progress and see how we're doing. Is that something that sort of in even quite technical terms, you think it might be a direction of travel for the Commission?
Yeah, thanks, Erica. I mean, I think, yes, and that's a little bit what I was trying to say before, in that, let's see what can be usefully brought into any EU level legal instrument. Mm-hmm. I mean, we, of course, have our statistical office also of the Commission. They produce a lot of data. So it is indeed about, how do you try and get an as coherent and as up-to-date picture so that we can have informed debates? Because it's not so useful to talk about, 2 years ago, this and that happened. No, what is the situation now? And that, of course, combines the data with the planning. And that is where we have this, quite comprehensive process also through the governance regulation, that we will be looking at the national energy and climate plans. I always say they're called national energy and climate plans, but we want them to cover the whole economy and the whole society, because the social aspects of the transition also need to be covered there. And it basically, climate, means the whole of society and the whole of economy. So, okay, they're called what they're called, but, we will be looking at all of these, what is happening, progress in the different sectors, progress in the enablers. Of course, we will need to deliver on the headline targets again, where are people in terms of meeting their greenhouse gas emission target, meeting their renewable energy target, and meeting their energy efficiency target. But in any case, you will only be able to assess that really by looking at the broader picture, as in, where are all these sectors today, where are they heading, what are their plans, and in particular also member state level planning. I think that is what we're really, really looking forward now in this version upcoming, well, this week, I suppose, of the new plans of the member states, and then our assessment recommendations, etc. So at the same time, that will be a continuing dialogue. And I think also their stakeholders are very, very important. The Committee of the Regions for sure, also all other stakeholders, because for me, I always say, look, the perfect is the enemy of the good. You know, we shouldn't be assuming that people are hiding things, or it is complex, and there's so many people involved. But so together, and the more information and data that is out there that can really also point at maybe difficulties or barriers that people are running into, I thought that was very pertinent what you were saying, that, we need to look at what is it you need, basically, not just the legislation at EU level. No, what is it now on the ground? And I can only say that we're very, very keen to have that discussion and to work with everyone, because the implementation on the ground is going to be crucial, or otherwise I really feel that, people will start wondering, what this was all about.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Yvonne. I think, Josko, you wanted to make a very, very short response to what Yvonne was saying.
I'm very glad it's working. I'm very glad that we understand that consistency between different policy is very important. We managed to put energy policy and climate policy in consistent mode, but not the rest of it. And for that, we should use the existing mechanisms. I mentioned a economic semester. Yeah, but there's a working group of greening where economic semester. COR should be would like to be involved in that, because we can then do it even more in that consistency area.
Yeah. Thanks, Josko. And I've just received a question here that has come in on the Zoom, and it's super cool because it was actually my next question. It's from Martin Verdonk, and it's a question for Robert. I'm sure also prompted by some of what Yvonne was saying and the other speakers as well. But could you just tell us what lessons you can share about data collection and how to improve it for the benefit of ECNO, for the Commission, for the national level industry also?
Yeah, I mean, there are several layers, because data collection that you need to deliver the, let's say, target for the EU and to submit information for the European Commission in different aspects of the emission, because there are benchmarking, free allocation. There was, of course, the derogation for energy sector, which was in previous period, and then you've got several work on data collection on other sectors which are not covered by the EU. With the EU ETS. That means that we also are looking on the industries which are not in the EU, the heating sector, which is used to be not within the EU ETS, now will be covered by the ETS too. So that means that a lot of data that you have to collect. The second, let's say, layer that you also need to face now is the CBAM process. So the collection of the data for the importers that are coming to the European market. And this is totally new from the, let's say, administration that is based on the emission that is occurring in the EU. So I think this is a challenge not only for the European countries, but at first for the European Commission. And that's why this is also worth to highlight this, what Yvonne said, that we need this breadth. So the breadth that we set up the Fit for 55, which is part of the, let's say, period of delivering the net zero in Green Deal. And that means that we have to implement all this, let's say, political wills and what we agreed in Fit for 55. And this is a very complex issue because there are several new things, starting with the CBAM, ETS2, which cover much more sector. At the same time, we got non-ETS, where we still have some sectors which are very, even more, let's say, difficult to reduce than like agriculture, than we think of. So the discussion on agriculture, as the European Commission started the public hearing on the putting the price or not in the agricultural sector, we got the removals process, which is, I think, the most important thing at the moment to, let's say, speed up the reduction and reducing the cost of the reduction in the systems that we already have in place. But getting back to the data, if you want to analyze all the, let's say, different aspects of the transformation, then there are different tools that you can use. So you can be based on the statistical information that you can deliver right from Eurostat on different levels, and then just look and specifically on the sector or the region that you want to analyze. But if you want to have this broader perspective, like we started to do, then you have to have the very huge amount of data which are delivered on the worldwide basis. Mm-hmm. So that means that there are a huge amount of information, but not enough to see the exactly, let's say, changes in the, I don't know, the specificity, sectoral, one of the products that you want to focus on. So that means that what we do, we deliver information, where is the room or the enabling condition, or what are the costs of this transformation, where the transformation is cheaper, in what sectors than in others. So what is the speed and timeline of this transformation occurred between sectors and between countries. So that is a quite important thing to then later focus on the allocation of the not only targets, but also supporting schemes to reduce the cost of the overall transformation, but at the same time working on the just transition point of view. So that means that data is a crucial point of focus, but it's not a thing that you only can focus on one set of data and that's enough. That's why I also, one of the examples is the Social Climate Fund, whereas the allocation process of Social Climate Fund. So some countries were focusing on the delays of the paying bills as a key point of reallocation of this fund, and the same others put forward the cost of the energy bills internally for the household. So that means that there are different points of view in different regions and different countries. So there is no one coherent point of view. So this is the harmonization of this, let's say, information doesn't mean that they supposed to be set up at the same level of all the countries internally in the EU. So you have to also deliver the differentiations between countries and the sectors.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. I think, yeah, just a glimpse there of quite how complex a field this is, which I'm sure we're, I mean, there's a lot of experts in the room on this, and I think the deeper we go, the more we're going to be confronted with these questions. But yeah, plenty to do. I'm afraid we won't have time for a question from the room, but there will be a bit of time after after we finish with sandwiches and things, in case you'd like to talk to any of the panelists, if they're able to stay, or the report authors. But for now, I'd like to thank Yvonne and Florie and Robert and Josko ever so much for your contributions. And please take your seats again. Thank you. Thank you. And then, so just one last part for today then, which is Laurence Tubiana has arrived a while ago now. She's been listening, I think, to some of the discussion. So Laurence is the CEO of the European Climate Foundation. As you may know, she's also the architect of the Paris Agreement and many, many other strings to her bow. So a very important person to hear from. So Laurence, please to give some closing remarks. Thank you.
I think it works, yes. That was a very interesting discussion I've been listening to, and of course the report before that, and very challenging, but really in a way shows the solidity of this engagement of the Europe in general, and the fact that we are building a tool to check and look at what is happening and to give a sort of a third-party assessment. I think it's a very good sign. We could do that. It's a sign of transparency. It's a sign of the capacity of the civil society to work with government and regions, as Josko said, which I will pick on him as well. So I think in general, I was very happy to see this is a tool. This is recognized and accepted, as you kindly mentioned, Yvonne. It is something that is very central to our democracy, to have elements that we can, in this world of fake news and insults on Twitter, just is good, no? To have where we can discuss peacefully and try to assess the difficulties, as you mentioned, and not just throwing insult at everyone's face. So I think one good sign in general. Second, of course, the report is good and in a way rewarding, because we see that and we know that, but it's good to have that in a way on paper and with clear indicators and very interesting methodology, by the way. And that we see that it is, despite of the different crises, even I know that the report, the next steps will be to report after, in particular, the more recent data, that Europe has keep going. And it was not a given. And we should be altogether proud, no, of it. We have been going even with this polycrisis we know. So I really, and it was again very interesting panelists. Thank you for your moderation, Erika, and your drive into having this exercise set up and for the future as well. And again, we see that this summer will be very important. You remember last winter, it was already, well, it's just not. We were all preparing for this very difficult winter because of the energy crisis. And unfortunately, we have to prepare ourselves for a very difficult summer. And, you know, we will have to, in a way, mix the short-term signals, the short-term concern and anxiety, and to relate them to the direction of travel. And I think it's a very important, we saw that with the winter campaign, many civil society and the Commission and the Council have been trying to deal with. We have find a solution to get out of this very difficult winter with, I think, the same direction. And I think for this summer, it will be very important to see that the forest fires, the water use, we have to integrate that and relate that to the efforts that Europe globally has to achieve. So we have the early signs of the climate crisis. And that's why, and in particular, talking to our societies, even if there is always this discussion why Europe, where all the other countries should do more. And that's why I think the panel said very clearly, it's important because we have to demonstrate that we can do it. We can do it, whether the different circumstances are. So, and again, I have been very involved in this summit on the Finance Climate Pact the last days. And you were seeing, of course, the good sign that many head of state from developing countries were there, more than the other ones. But it was a good sign that they are looking for Europeans to say, what do you do? And I think it was very happy to see both the Chancellor Scholz and Macron and some others were there to say, we have to respond to your demands. So I think it's a global problem, absolutely, but we have to have our solutions. I understand and took, of course, this discussion about the difficulties, as you mentioned, for your sector. I have a lot of hopes for the chemical sector, you know, because that's a sector where many things can change, because you are with a glue on many industrial sectors. And I understand your point totally, but I will be happy to see even more drive from this sector to make the other sector advance more quickly, because you can instrumentalize, you can engineer many new alternatives. And in particular, you refer to recycling and let's think about the critical materials we need because of your capacity to assemble things. So I know that the sector was not the front runner in terms of targets, as of course, and it was logical that energy came first. But I think now is your turn, and I was happy you mentioned that, and certainly encourage you and your teams just to demonstrate to the sectors that they can do much better. They should not be afraid of sticking to the fossil fuel sector, because you can be totally independent in the future, of course. So anyway, I hope so. And the same on agriculture. We are talking a lot about the cost for agriculture transition, but I think mostly because we haven't looked seriously about what does it mean. It means certainly as deep change as we had seen in the energy sector. And for the moment, of course, the discussion, what the sector like it is, can in a way afford to reduce emission. And I think we have to be more structural, and that's difficult. So it's not so much, it's a cost problem, but not only a cost problem, is the technological revolution we need for the sector is not yet there, because there is, of course, as you know, a lot of pushback. But I think that's the way we should talk to them. And of course, understanding that other sector can go much quicker. But it took 15 years or more to have the energy sector in line, and it's not done. So I can understand the delay, but I think it would be very, very good to just go just quicker, and not just to, let's say, I've been in that for many years, and I think they are too much using the argument that they need time and they cannot do that overnight. But that's not already 15 years we are talking to them. So overnight can be, that's the same like the fossil fuel companies. They always say, oh, we can do that. We cannot do that overnight. Come on. But you knew in 1960 that they had to do something. So again, good to push them, very good to have a sequence and differentiated approach to the transition. That's very good and very necessary. So I'm very happy that with ECNO, we have tools to understand what is happening, monitor where and how the real economy is or isn't responding adequately to those plans, and the policies put in place to steer. And we were talking about this element of the legislative. And of course, it's not because there is a law that it is implemented, but the law, and because it's translated into legislative element, it can open the floor, and ECNO is a tool as well for the civil society to call on governments and ask for responses. I see that in France, we begin to be as good as our Dutch colleagues to call for the government, which is good. And it's now, I see now the highest institution in the judiciary, in the administrative judiciary, now well and better trained to look at the details of the governance and the law and say to the government, you are not doing the job you committed to. So I think that's very important. The legislative doesn't do everything, but it is a powerful tool for implementation. And I recognize, as you said, that everything these days is about implementation. I think that the governance issue, as you mentioned, Josko, is super important, because what do we need at national level is a buy-in of the society. And how you get the buy-in of society, just to explain. You can't have cities and region just receiving instruction and delivering. That's not the way it works. They have to, societies, and through your voters, through your representative type of democracy, you have to be the one. I'm very happy of what you said, because I'm pushing for, in particular in the climate convention process, in the implementation of Paris, I'm arguing that the next round of the national determined contribution should include the commitments of the region and the local authorities, and they should be, in a way, there will be solidarity between them, meaning the commitments are the same weight. And for the moment, it's not the case. So the way you describe your position on the side as one of stakeholder, and that's not reasonable given the structure of the job you are and the representation. So I'm a very big fan, not only, of course, have the committee and region participating to that, but being at the craft and the design of the implementation policy at home. I happen to be a member of the High Council, and in France, you know, the scientific bodies, we have the same at European level. I was struck by the fact that we understood that the regional plans for carbon neutrality and the city's plan for the carbon neutrality didn't have any consistency with the national government one. So there was documents that were there and with no contact. So I think it's a moment just to upgrade and have a real participation. So I think we are going in the right direction. As the report said, 9 out of 13 building blocks of our climate neutral future are still behind where they need to be. I know that we are going through very difficult moments, and probably we'll see that in the next report. But we need to have in the global stocktake clear message of Europe that will be so central. You know, there is so much. You know, you look at South Korea, you look at many countries that say, oh, it's going too quickly, we cannot deliver. It's really a moment to really hold strong and say what we are delivering. And it's a way for Europe just to have a better growth and a better development. So to end with all this, I think I really would like this tool to be useful for the Commission, to be useful for the government, to be useful for the local authorities, whether level they are, and to be really useful for the civil society. Just not to ask, as you said, targets and more targets, so as you said, and more implementation, but understand as well the real difficulties. Sometime, and I will end by that, our climate community is strong, well organized, and sometimes too working too much as a bubble. And we need to talk to other constituencies. For that, we need to understand what's going on. And again, I call for using all this data to understand where the social problems are, how to respond to them, just to be that this climate thing has to be everybody's problem. And I think this tool is very important for that. So thank you. Thank you, Erika and her team, to have launched that with many other institutions. I hope you keep going. And I will be very happy that ECF can help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurence. Very, very helpful and pertinent remarks, also helping to place ECNO back in the bigger context. So we're almost at time, and I would like to just take a moment to thank very, very warmly all of our participants and contributors today, the speakers, the panelists, also yourselves for joining, our friends online as well. Matthias, do we have a little demonstration?
We do.
We do. And before that, do we have the other slide?
We do have it. Whether it's going to show, let's see whether the magic still works. The big thank you we already had. And indeed,
this is the other slide. So yes, besides the people who have sort of been here today and that you've seen from, this is just to give you a sense of all of the people who've been involved in bringing this to life. Unfortunately, I can't name them all here in the time that we've got, but they are
very briefly. We're showing the wrong thing. You could just move back there to technology, guys.
I'm looking at this, and you're looking.
Exactly.
Okay, you can tell we didn't sort of prepare this bit very well, can't you? All of these people, wonderful people. Eike, who we mentioned before, is the lead author, but a whole team from Ecologic, from CliMact, I4C, NewClimate Institute, Reform Institute, 89 Up, Consult Climate, from ECF, Nimali has been an absolute trooper, and we wouldn't be here today if it weren't for Nimali as well. So, and Donald as well. So thank you to all of you. Please take a moment to, internally thank these people. And plenty of work to do for the next round of ECNO as well. The website you saw scrolling through there, this is where you need to go if you want to have a deeper look. I did caution you against printing the report earlier because it is pretty long, but a very good read if you do have the stomach for it.
And the website has all of the results. It has the essential messages. It has the background explained, a separate methodology paper. It has all of the building blocks, and for each one of them also individual pages that show you overall progress and then go into the individual indicators. And those actually also even display the data that is underpinning them. Hopefully this way you can all zoom into the specific bits and pieces that interest you going forward.
Great. Thank you very much, Matthias. I hope you can all have a good fun looking around that later. And thanks to all the team who've been working right up to the last minute to get the website ready to go live as well. We have some sandwiches, I think. So with that, I warmly invite you to stay for a last sort of discussion of what you've heard today, and wish you a very good week and all the best. Thank you very much.